What's going on, Colts Nation? I appreciate you joining me today. Today we're going to talk about one of the free agents that the Colts are letting go. Somebody that looks like we're probably not going to get back. And this has kind of been my feeling all along. I feel like Zack Moss, the man we're talking about here, Zack Moss, and what he was able to do for the Colts, and with the fact that the Colts just paid Jonathan Taylor, and there are a lot of teams that need a running back. It just seems like Zack Moss not going to end up being back with the Colts. And there was comments after the end of the season where Zack Moss was talking about he'd like to come back to the Colts and would like to keep being a duo with Jonathan Taylor, and he thinks that would be a good thing. But the latest post on Twitter from Zack Moss was about how he wants all the money, and it was a lyric from a song, but he did pick a lyric talking about he wants all the money. He's going for all the money. So this is a guy that wants to be a starter somewhere, wants to get starter money somewhere. And when you look at what he was able to do when Jonathan Taylor wasn't in the lineup at the beginning of the season and there in the middle of the season for a couple of games, like Zack Moss deserves to go get some money somewhere, whether it's with the Colts or somebody else. But you just have to assume at this point the Colts aren't going to pay him, right? And there are other options for him. Like, of course, it'd be nice if the Colts were going to pay him. It'd be nice, and what would that contract look like, right? With the money that the Colts have to spend, how much of that would they be okay with allocating towards a backup running back, right? With the role that he would play, hoping Jonathan Taylor becomes Jonathan Taylor again. How much are you really going to depend on a backup running back, right? How much are you willing to pay a backup running back? Just like the backup quarterback situation, how much are you willing to pay a backup quarterback in case something happens to Anthony Richardson? How much are you willing to pay a backup running back in case Jonathan Taylor does miss a few games again? So those are questions that need to be answered with this whole Zack Moss situation. But then going forward, as I was looking around the league and I was trying to figure out where could Zack Moss end up? Like, where is he likely to go if it's not with the Colts? And the first team that I came across, I was looking at the AFC, which is why they were the first team I came across. But looking in the AFC, it looks like the Bengals could be an opportunity for Zack Moss. I've heard some rumblings about the Bengals maybe moving on from Joe Mixon. And if you look at Joe Mixon's year with the Bengals, it's the last year on his contract in 2024. His base salary is $2.2 million. And in terms of fully guaranteed money and a roster bonus, he gets $3 million. His dead cap hit for 2024 is $2.75 million, which is very low considering everything that goes into it. So when you look at it, you're thinking, okay, if his cap number ends up being $8.85 million for this season, then what would they be willing to pay Zack Moss, right? And that's the reason I think maybe the Bengals aren't a destination for Zack Moss, because at 8.85, like, that seems like a lot of money for a backup running back, and it would be. But again, with what he was able to do for us, with the way he can help Jonathan Taylor and the way those two can balance things between them, I feel like if the number for Zack Moss is $8.85 million, and the Colts should pay that for Zack Moss. Now, I think if Zack Moss is looking for 10 plus, we don't need to go down that road. But I think if we can go up to 9 and we can keep him here instead of letting him go specifically and especially to an AFC team, right? With the AFC being as stacked as it is, we don't want to have to worry about playing against Zack Moss. So go ahead, give Zack Moss the contract he wants. Let him come back to us. We know what he can be on this team. So go ahead and bring him back for $9 million, and don't let somebody like the Bengals get him, right? And the Bengals, again, what would they pay? If they're not willing to pay what Zack Moss wants, that's good for us. So then I was looking around what other teams might be good for him, and maybe the Ravens, right? But I think the Ravens kind of like their running backs. They got a lot of injury prone running backs is really the thing with them. Then looking at the NFC, moving over to the NFC, there aren't a whole lot of teams in the AFC that I think will want his services. And then in the NFC, there are a few, like the Cowboys. Whether they get Tony Pollard back, or if they don't get Tony Pollard back, they want to bring in a running back. Maybe they want to go a little cheaper at running back than they would have to with Pollard, and they go get Zack Moss. Okay, now we also mentioned in the video yesterday there are rumblings about Saquon Barkley possibly going to the Cowboys. So maybe that's a possibility. Maybe they go that route, but if they want to go a little cheaper in terms of running back than what they would have to with a Saquon Barkley or Tony Pollard, then maybe they go Zach Moss, get a good running back that can come in, try to help this team get over the hump in the playoffs, right? Then you have the Giants. If Saquon doesn't go back to the Giants, they're going to be in the market. And I think the Giants would be a place where Zach Moss could possibly end up. And honestly, all the NFC East teams are kind of wild cards from year to year. You know, they kind of move in their own way, really. The NFC East is a different animal in the NFL. So, Zach Moss, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up on any of the teams in the NFC East, but Cowboys and Giants are really what I'm looking at there. Then moving on to the next division, NFC North. I feel like the Bears could be a place, but probably not with Khalil Herbert and the guy that was a rookie last year. Can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he played pretty well last year for them. And the Lions not going to be a spot for Zach Moss. Packers not going to be a spot for Zach Moss, but I think that the Vikings would be an interesting spot, depending on what they do at quarterback, whether they draft somebody or try to bring in somebody. Maybe they bring in Gardner Minshew and then they want to go out and get Zach Moss, right? You're saving a little money getting Gardner Minshew. So maybe you pay a little bit extra, get a guy like Zach Moss come in. Those two have worked together. You know, they have some communication together. They can work together in that offense, and maybe they can have some success there, especially having Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison over there. So maybe the Vikings are an interesting place for Zach Moss. That's one where I would not be surprised at all if Zach Moss ends up in Minnesota, especially because, yes, the weather's terrible there, but they play indoors. You wouldn't really have to worry about anything there. Okay, then you move to the NFC South, and what we're looking at here, like the Panthers, I could see him ending up on the Panthers because Miles Sanders, and that whole situation looks like that move's not going to work out. So maybe they go out, get Zach Moss, try to get some competition in that running back room, you know, another new regime coming in. Maybe they want to do something a little different. Zach Moss could end up in Carolina, but then the other three teams in that division, I feel like are good on running backs. You know, obviously the Saints have Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson, and Tyler Algier with the Falcons, and Rashad White's there with the Bucks. So then you move to the last one, the NFC West. I think the Cardinals are fine riding out with James Conner. Obviously, Kyron Williams with the LA Rams, he was really good. The Niners have CMC. Maybe they want to get some depth, but again, Zach Moss wants to be a starter. And then Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker there in Seattle. So when you look at it, like the options are kind of thin when you consider what Zach Moss wants. And there's such a fine line because there isn't a whole lot on Zach Moss being a starter, right? Like he had his time in Buffalo where he couldn't really find his groove. Then he comes to Indy, and even on a terrible Indy team in 2022, that back half of it, he had some starting time. He was able to make some things happen. Then when Jonathan Taylor was out of the lineup at different times in 2023, Zach Moss made it happen. But there were also times where Zach Moss was pretty much non-existent as a backup. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this whole Zach Moss situation. All right, how ironic would it be if he ends up back with the Bills? I could see the Patriots maybe being a destination for him, depending on what they want to do this offseason, right? Talked about the Bengals. That's a situation that he could end up in. The Ravens, a situation he could end up in, right? The Cowboys, the Giants, the Bears, the Vikings. Those are the teams that I'm looking at where he could possibly end up there. Now, obviously, cap situations and different needs are going to play into that. And I haven't done all that research for those different teams and what they might want to be doing, but it just makes sense. Zach Moss could end up on any of those teams. If he doesn't, then I would love to have him back, pair him with Jonathan Taylor. I love that duo. All right, go into 2024, having that duo, I'd feel very comfortable with the depth that we have there, with the talent that we have at that position. And that's honestly what I'm hoping happens. The question becomes, what do we pay him? And again, up to $9 million is about what I think I'd be willing to pay for Zach Moss. And again, now there are going to be different things that have to be done, right? You're going to have to restructure some contracts if you really want to make that happen, because Pitt's going to have to be paid, whether it's franchise tag or whether it's a new contract. Kenny Moore, I think, is a priority. He has to come back. You need Kenny Moore for that defense. Right? A lot of people think that Grover Stewart's a priority, has to come back, right? And if we're going to go that direction and pay him, Then you want to pay Zach Moss. Also, you're going to have to figure some things out with the salary cap, especially if you want to go out and try to get a veteran for the secondary, get a veteran for the pass rush, however you want to do it. Something has to give. The Colts have cap money, but they need to use their cap money. If we're going to contend with the teams like the Chiefs and teams like the 49ers while AR is on his rookie contract, this is the offseason. They have a bunch of cap space. They got to make some moves, whether it's free agency and the draft. And I think they have to make some pretty bold moves in both free agency and the draft and make something happen so that we're truly going to be contending and we're not stuck in that middle ground. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are. What would you want to pay Zach Moss to come back? Do you think we should pay Zach Moss to come back? Is $9 million too much? Or is that not enough? Would you be willing to pay more? I'd love to know your opinion on this down in the comment section. Please let me know. And please be sure to hit that subscribe button and have those notifications turned on so you get notified when any more videos come out. We have daily content all throughout the off season. So make sure you get notified for each and every video. And of course, I appreciate you stopping by for another video. As always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and go Colts.